All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. So if you got your question, go ahead and post it. It's either going to be below the video if you're on a mobile device. If you're on a laptop, desktop computer, something like that, it's going to be it's going to be to the right of the video most likely. So I typically start with questions that were asked up to an hour before the office hour started. The reason why I do that is I just want to try to answer questions for folks who are actually here, waiting to get their questions answered. If you're posting your question, a long time ago, then, like at 11 o'clock last night or something like that, then it's not likely that you're here waiting to get your question get answered. So we'll be starting with, looks like Rich P here in a minute. But first I want to talk about what are the biggest mistakes that you see when working on the move. Like a lot of people have a lot of trouble with the move, getting it to work. And I'll tell you, this is the biggest mistake that I see. It's very, very common. So what ends up happening is, and just to go over what the move is exactly, the move is essentially getting the club on plane as soon as possible in the transition, and then also getting that club face as square as soon as possible in the transition. So what that would mean is that bringing this club up to here, right? It's above the plane. And to get an idea of where the swing plane is, basically what you would do is you draw a line. Here I am at address. Get the right camera angle, get shooting right down your feet here about waist level. You take a line and you draw it from the hosel of your club here at address up through your trail elbow. And if you do that, that gives you a good general idea of where that swing plane is. So when I bring this club up to the top, that plane is in this area. I'm above that. So what I have to do is I have to bring that down onto the plane. And I want to get that down on the plane as soon as I can. What we often see with people, especially those who slice, who have really very, very inconsistent, have a hard time making consistent contact, because this affects everything. If you don't get this club on plane, it's really, really difficult to make good ball first contact, because you have to make compensations later in the swing. It's really hard to have your path come down correctly, because you're going to have to make some sort of compensation in the swing. It's hard to hit it in the center of the face, because the club, you're trying to manipulate the club and get it to go in all kinds of different directions. It's just hard to get a sense and feel for where that face is. So the move allows you to get that club on plane as soon as possible, so that now you're here. Now we can continue to turn into the golf ball. There isn't anything I have to do to manipulate this club. So the most common thing I see is that people get this club steep, and when they get it steep, if you're a better player, typically if you're starting down steep, what you'll do is you'll stand up to get that club to now drop down onto that plane that I was just talking about. But the problem is with that is now the club has momentum going this way, and generally you're going to hit a lot of shots off the toe most likely, or even off the heel, because sometimes your hips kind of move toward the golf ball, and that moves your hands out toward the golf ball. It's just hard to be consistent when you do that. Now you can hit great golf shots doing that, coming down steep initially. You can absolutely do that, but it becomes very dependent on timing, and that's where it gets difficult to be consistent. Your timing just has to be so dead on all the time to be able to have a good round. Now some days you may go out and you may play great, and you think, man, I'm doing great, and then the next day that timing is off, and now it's like you've never played golf before, right? You don't even know why you play anymore. I've been on that roller coaster. I know what that feels like, and I'm sure a lot of you do as well. So this move, working on the move, getting that club on plane as soon as possible and getting it squared up as soon as possible. So now we're shallowing it, and now we're also, people, when I say on plane, that basically means shallowing out the club, getting the club on plane. And then we're squaring that face earlier in the swing, because the other part of the move, or the thing about the move that helps you, is it gets that face square earlier. Because a lot of times we get this face open, we're coming down right here, and then if I were to keep going and come into impact, my face would be wide open. I would hit the ball a mile to the right. So what most good players do is they'll stand up and release that club, because releasing the club early, going like this, flipping the club, that's a mechanism to close the face. So if I have this face way open, I'm going to flip that club at the last second to get that face squared up. So it's just so difficult to be consistent and good if you're not shallowing the club and squaring the face earlier in the swing. So a lot of people are trying to do this, and for good reason, for the things that I just talked about. So what I often see with people who try to get this club to be on plane is what they'll do is at the start of the downswing, they'll go like this, right? So they go into right side bend right away. And from this angle, if you look at this, they'll go into right side bend right away. So as you can see here, that shallows the club, but now I'm going to have a hard time getting to the golf ball from here. Because if I do, if I keep going from this position right here, I'm more than likely going to hit the ground way behind the ball. I'm going to be hitting the ground and chunking it way back here. If I happen to be able to not chunk it, I'm probably going to stall my hips and flip to get the club back in front of me. You'll more than likely hit some thins. It's just you're not really fixing anything when you do that. You're getting the club on plane, but now you're introducing other things that are going to be issues. So what we want to do is we want to make that same motion that you were most likely making before when you were coming down steep. You are more than likely, because most people I see I have the spine angled away. They just start down this club steep just because it feels so stinking powerful to do that. When the reality, it's not, right? So what we want to do is we want to get this club shallowing out by means of our arms. We want our arms turning the club, right? Because a good way to kind of look at it is you want to try to get the club perpendicular to your spine, right? So that would be like this, right? So if I'm down here, right, if I'm coming down into contact, now it's not going to be exactly perpendicular to my spine, but you can see as I'm coming down, if I come down correctly and I shallow out this club, you can see that club is pretty close to perpendicular to my back line. That's ideal. If you go look at tour players, most tour players, you're going to see that kind of position. When the club's coming down, getting in that lead arm parallel, a little bit past position, you're going to see that club is about perpendicular to their spine. That's what you're going to see. So if I go up to the top and I just tilt my body like this, well, my club is not perpendicular to my spine. If it was, it would be like that, right? So that's what we want to feel. We want to get the elbow working in. We want to get the trail elbow underneath the lead elbow. We want to get this lead elbow almost like there's a laser shooting out and it's pointing parallel, right? So if you're having trouble with this and you're just not sure how to get this club shallow, then it's got to be with the arms. It's got to be turning the arms. So we call this turning the doorknob, right? So if you imagine if you were going to take the doorknob here and you were going to turn it with your wrist, that's essentially what you're doing. Your forearms are rolling over. If I do that right here, my elbow is going to be working into my body. See, if I were to grab a doorknob right here, if I was like this, right, I would turn my elbow into my body. With my left arm, right, if I were to turn a doorknob, my elbow would be pointing more out like that, right? If I was turning a doorknob that way. And that's the feeling that we want to have when we're doing the move. That's going to get the club where it's close to perpendicular to your spine. So I would really try to exaggerate that if you're having trouble with this. And one of the best drills to work on this is the tennis racket drill from the move. So when you're working on the move and you're doing the tennis racket drill, be sure to shallow out this club by turning the arms, not by going into excessive right side bend, because we're going to chunk and have to make all kinds of compensations from that position. We want to come down in the same position like we were before. There's going to be a little bit of right side bend, but that right side bend is going to be happening more later as we start to open our body, right? So as I start to open up my body, that's when that right side bend is coming in. So now I have that right side bend right there, and I'm in this great position where I can release this club out front. But if I'm here and I go into right side bend right now, my hip gets bumped out. I can't rotate. I have to flip. I'm going to chunk. It's just that's why a lot of people give up on this move because of this reasons. The biggest mistake that I see. So I highly recommend working on the move, but as you're working through it, be very aware of this issue in the swing. I work with the move with a lot of my students, and like I said, this is a big issue that I see. So make sure, look on video, make sure that you're seeing when you're shallowing out that club, make sure that you're seeing that club get pretty close to where the tennis racket here, get pretty close to perpendicular to your spine. If it's staying the same relationship to your spine as it was before, and you're just going like this, that's going to be issues. That's going to cause a lot of issues. It's not going to help you. It's probably going to make things worse. So make sure that you're getting that club shallowed out. And then the tennis racket, the reason why we use the tennis racket drill is it just makes it easier to visualize where the face is pointing. So get it pointing up to the sky by turning. See how my arms are turning? My elbow's working in. My lead elbow's working out that way. And then I'm turning that handle. That's squaring the face. See, and now from here, I can really come down and come into contact in a great position. So if you look at that from this angle, I'm shallowing out the club. I'm turning that handle down. And now I'm able to get into this nice position here and release that club out in front. So hopefully that helps you all. Let me know if you have any further questions about that. But yeah, that's the biggest issue that I see. All right, so as I mentioned here, we're going to start here with Rich P. All right, so Rich P says, I have a tendency to pucker up once you put a fairway in front of me, and I hit a lot of pop-ups to the right. Tips on taking the driving range to the course would be helpful. Rich in Northern California. So it's hard to say exactly what's going on with your swing, but most likely what's going on if you're getting those pop-ups, that is from your low point occurring to, it's most likely coming over the top, and your low point is happening close to where the golf ball is. So when you get a pop-up, if I have a ball here, when you get a pop-up, what's going on, I'm sure you're aware of this, but maybe for those who aren't, if you have a pop-up, that's from the ball basically hitting the crown of the driver like that. So if I'm coming down, when I'm talking about low point, I'm talking about where that club is coming down, reaching a low point, and then working back up into the golf ball. So if I swing over the top, right? So this would be over the top like this. If I swing over the top, that moves that low point more toward the golf ball. And when we're playing that ball forward in our stance with our driver, we swing over the top, that low point's happening pretty much right at the golf ball, and you're sliding right underneath it and getting that big pop-up. So what you need to do is you need to get this path working more into out. Get this path working more into out, so that way you can hit more up into the golf ball, and that club will bottom out here and then work up into the golf ball and get that nice strike. And that way you can get that high launch, not a pop-up launch, but a high launch, low spin, penetrating distance. That's exactly what you want to have. That's what the tour players are doing. So some things that I would look at in your swing might be your spine angle, right? So a lot of times if you're coming over the top like this, your spine angle, see what happens to my spine when I do that? My spine angle is leaning kind of toward the target. I need to get my spine angle more angled away so that naturally I'll want to work that club from the inside. So that would be one thing I would look at. Another thing I would look at is like what I talked about a minute ago, is this club starting down very, very steep. And you could have a great spine angle, but if this club's starting down very, very steep and you don't make some sort of compensation like standing up or having that right side bend or things like that to get the club to work from the inside, then you're just going to continue to come over the top and maybe get that pop-up. So you may need to work on the move to get this club where it's shallowed out, right? Close to perpendicular to your spine, like what I was talking about. And that's going to help you get that club to work from the inside, allow you to hit up on the golf ball. So that's the move course. I'd recommend the move course, checking that out. That would be a good one. The Never Slice Again course would also be a good one. That's a good one to get your path working from the inside. If you look at your swing on video and you see your spine angle is too vertical or even leaning toward the target, that would be a good one to work on. So just look at your video, see what's going on there, and work on the appropriate drill there. So Never Slice Again, the move, stable fluid spine, those would all likely be pretty good courses for you depending on what you're seeing on video. I know it can be hard to know what you need to work on, but I would say if your spine angle is vertical, it's definitely going to be spine angle. If you see that your club is steep and coming over the top, the Never Slice Again course or the move course would be good. Either one of them. Work through both of them. They both would be good for you. So check those out. Click the house icon. Go to the top of the page. Click that house icon. Then scroll down on the home page and select the move or select one of those courses to get started on. If you look at your video and you just don't know, I know it can be hard to tell, especially if you're just not If you don't know all this stuff, as an instructor, if you're not an instructor, sometimes it can be difficult to know. So if you want to work with one of our instructors, go to the top of the page and click Get a Review, and scroll down there and grab a spot if you see one, if you want to work with somebody and know exactly what you need to work on. If not, if you need to join the waiting list, make sure that you do that. So that way you can be notified whenever spots open up. And a quick note on that, spots, they typically sell out pretty quick. So make sure if you join that waiting list that once you get that email, you jump on it. So that way you can claim your spot. All right. So David A says, a lefty like my buddy Phil. One of my issues is my left shoulder on the downswing has a tendency to tighten up, which causes me to pull my shots to the right. Any solutions? Like I said, I'd recommend basically the exact same thing that I talked about with Rich. Your spine angle is probably leaning toward the target, which makes your natural inclination to want to go that way. It could be your spine angle is good and you just want to push out with that right arm. So, or your left arm, it would be. So you need to relax that arm and get that club working from the inside and trust that you're going to be able to hit it straight. You may not hit straight shots initially, but after you block a couple, you can start getting that club face closed by using the move. So I'd recommend the move or the Stable Fluid Spine course. It's basically the same issue that Rich has, just described in a different way. It's what it sounds like. So Tom L says, regarding the move and twisting the club shaft to close the face with the driver. Looks like it didn't post the rest. Okay, here's the rest of it. When I twist the shaft in the move training, I don't feel like I can snap the driver, releasing the angle as well as I can if I do not turn the shaft on the downswing. Make any sense? Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing to keep in mind is that feel is not real, right? So this probably feels very fast to you. And that's probably a big reason, or in my opinion, it is a big reason why a lot of people release the club early, is because that feels really fast and powerful. But in reality, it's really adding loft to the club, which is taking away power, right? And it's also forcing you to manipulate the club instead of using the natural momentum of the club, which makes it very difficult to be consistent. So I'm telling you, it's not going to feel powerful. It's going to feel more effortless. Is most likely initially is what it's going to feel like. It's going to feel more effortless, and like your body's bringing it in, and your body just feels like it doesn't move as fast as your arms, which is why it feels that way. But once you start to get the hang of it, and you're using the momentum of your body, right? You're using the momentum of the club, and the club's starting to whip through naturally. You can start going harder at it, and it's going to start to feel more and more powerful. So right now, it definitely probably feels weak because you're kind of just letting the club kind of whip through there, and it just doesn't feel very fast. But in reality, and right now it may not be very fast because you typically do have to go slower to get the hang of it and then build up the speed. But eventually you're gonna get comfortable with it, and you're gonna be able to turn hard, like you see with Dustin Johnson. Like he is whipping through that golf ball a ton. He is not doing anything with his wrists. He creates this structure with his wrists, and then he releases that with his body, whipping the club through there. So it just takes some time to get there. But right now it probably feels weak, but that's probably not the reality of what's going on. So Jeff J says, is there a good drill to assist with keeping your lead arm straight? So first of all, lead arm straight, that is a total myth in the golf swing. You do not have to keep your lead arm straight. Now you can have excessive bend in the lead arm that can possibly cause some issues, but lead arm dead straight, that is not. There's tons of tour players that have a lot of bend in their lead arm. Brooks Koepka, Justin Thomas does have a little bit. Jordan Spieth, that's what I was thinking of. Lee Westwood, Jamie Sadlowski. He's not a PGA Tour player, but he's a professional golfer. He used to be a long drive guy, won some long drive contests at 170 pounds or 180 pounds or something like that. I think he's like 5'10", 5'11", and he was competing with guys that are 260, 270 pounds. Like that's insane. If you think about it, that's really insane. So the bent lead arm is not something that you really have to worry about. Now, if it's super excessive, then that can be a problem. So I understand why people think they want to have that lead arm, partially because you do see a lot of tour players with that straight lead arm, like Tiger and Rory and some players like that. A lot of players do, and they probably thought the same thing when they were growing up and working on things, and they just have it to where it's ingrained in their swing to basically keep that lead arm straight. So lead arm, I understand, yes, it creates a bigger arc, which can help you get more speed. That is absolutely true. But if I have my upper arm stays in the same spot and I bend it a little bit, excuse me, now I have a longer arc. It may be a little less width, but now it's longer. That essentially cancels out anything you're getting from it being longer. Now, the people who I see that I've tried to change the bent lead arm are people who are having an excessive bent lead arm, and that's coming from not turning the shoulders. So I've had, it doesn't happen very often, but every now and then I'll get a student who doesn't really like to turn their back away from the target. So it feels uncomfortable to them, which is fairly normal, especially for a beginner player. But they like to keep the ball in front of them and not turn their back to it. So what they'll do is they'll just kind of go like this, right? They don't really turn their hips very much. They don't turn their chest very much. So to get any kind of power, right, they tend to really bend the arms like this, and they have about a 90-degree angle at the arm. And then from there, then they cast the club and throw the club into the golf ball to try to get some power. That would be a situation where we try to change that, where we would try to, one, get more comfortable with turning our shoulders. And sometimes that just does the trick. If I just get them to turn their shoulders, now all of a sudden they might have some bend in the arm, but this is completely fine right here. I don't mind that at all. That's what you're going to see with Brooks Koepka, Jordan Spieth, Lee Westwood, Angel Cabrera, Jamie Solowski. Lots and lots of great names, a lot of major championship winners in there, or long drive champion winners there as well. So that would be the best thing. That's what I would look at. But if you are getting a good shoulder turn and you have excessive bend in the lead arm and you're casting this club from the very beginning, because that's typically, if you have excessive bend in the lead arm, a lot of times your first inclination is to cast the club to get it back in front of your body as soon as possible. So this may seem like a kind of a trivial drill, but really I would just go up to the top and I would pause at the top, straight lead arm, right? And then I would swing down into the full finish, do some practice swings, and then I would try to add some fluidity, really shorten up that pause. So I'd go up, pause, and get it there. Then I would go up and I would shorten up the pause. So I'd go up here, maybe a slight pause, and then I'd come down. And then I would do it again with a straight lead arm and take the pause out of there, add some fluidity to it. Once that feels comfortable, then I would add the golf ball. I'd do the same thing. Go up to the top, pause, straight lead arm, swing down into the golf ball. Once that starts to feel comfortable, maybe you can get 3 in a row doing that. Then I would go up to the top, shorten the pause, and then do the same thing. Get to where you're comfortable with that. Then I would add some fluidity to it and go a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster. But really, it's just going up to the top, pausing, making sure that straight lead arm, that arm is straight, and then coming down. But I would only really mess with that if you are basically going like this and casting the club from the very beginning. Because if you have that arm straight, then you can start with your lower body and get things working a little bit better. That's only if you have some bend like this, that's completely fine. I wouldn't even worry about that at all. So Jeff J says, after the club takeaway, what's the next best step to work on getting your club on the right swing plane? Really is just to continue up to the top of the swing. What I like to do is just find a good top of the swing position to get a sense for where that is. and then try to get the club to that position at the top. So a good drill to kind of help you get a sense and feel for where that is. I'll actually use a shorter club because it's easier to do. But what I would do is I just get in your setup position here. I would hinge the club up like this. And then what I want you to do from here, when you hinge the club up to 90 degrees, is I want you to turn the wrist to where the left wrist is nice and flat. So your right wrist is going to go back like that, and your left wrist is going to flatten like that. So that's essentially you're closing the face by twisting it, right? So I've hinged the club up, straight up to 90 degrees, and then I've twisted it down. Trail wrist is bent back, lead wrist is nice and flat or slightly bowed. From here, I'm just going to lift this club and try to get it, keep my left arm relatively straight or slightly bent is fine. Your right arm is going to have some bend in it. And I'm just going to try to put it as far up above my right shoulder as much as possible, right? And then from there, I'm going to turn my hips and I'm going to turn my shoulders 90 degrees. That is a good top of the swing position. We'll look at it from this angle. So again, I'm hinging the club up to 90 degrees. And then I'm twisting that handle down. That's squaring the face. And then I'm taking this club up over. I'm retaining my golf posture here as well. I'm taking this club up over my right shoulder. And now I'm turning my shoulders, my hips about 45 degrees. My shoulders about 90 degrees. This is a great top of the swing position. So I would try to get into this position and get a good sense and feel for this position. And now what I'm going to do, now that I understand where I want to be, now I'm just going to take the club up there. I'm just going to take the club right back up to that position and get a sense for where that is. That's a great drill to help you to get up there. I don't recommend trying to work on getting this perfect to here and then trying to figure out, okay, now how do I get it to here to here? It's too segmented, and I think it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. To me, it makes a lot more sense to know where you want to go, right? Get that good top of the backswing position, and then just take the club up there. Just take it up there. And if you take it up there a little bit like this, that's fine. If you take it up there like this, that's fine. That's okay. Just bring it up there to that spot, and it should be in a good place to be to start the downswing. All right, so Charles T says, I think my posture is too upright. I understand the spine tilt away from the target of 6 to 8 degrees, but what are the parameters for spine tilt perpendicular to the target? So good question there. A good way to kind of get a sense for this is I would just stand straight up like this, get a little bit of flex in the knees. So basically you're just dropping down like an inch or two. So I don't want your legs completely straight like this. I don't want you down like this. I want you just to drop down a little bit, keep your butt kind of underneath you, but that's about it. So now I'm in this nice kind of athletic position. You want to feel like if somebody, I don't know if you ever played that game where you stood across from somebody, and I can't remember what they called it. It's kind of like a sumo wrestling a little bit, but you can't move your feet, right? So imagine you're playing that game with somebody, and someone's across from you, you're trying to push them off of their spot. They're trying to push you off your spot. That's kind of the same kind of feeling you want. You want to have a nice kind of athletic position to feel like you're kind of in the ground, your butt's underneath it. If I was like this, right, which I often see people get their butt way too far over their ankles, he could just push me back and I would just go straight back, right? Whereas if I was like this, he could just push me and I would also go straight back. So I want to get a little bit of flex in my legs to feel like I can, I can push him, right? So now from there, I'm going to have my arms hang straight down, and I'm going to hinge. I'm going to kind of push my butt back just a little bit, and I'm going to hinge forward, and I'm going to stop once my hands get about 4 or 5 inches in front of my thighs. So that's there. That's about right there. So my butt's still a little bit underneath me. I pushed out just a little bit so that way I can get my shoulders out here. And then from there, I'm just going to grab the club. And right there, that's a pretty good posture right there. Now, that's not to say that that's exactly where you have to be. That's just a good general place to be, right? We see lots of players in all kinds of positions. If you look at Jim Furyk, right? Jim Furyk's like this, right? He's got his hands in his lap. If you look at Bryson DeChambeau, right? He's like this, right? He's basically set up like this. The arm's much further out away from him. So that's a good general place to be, but that doesn't mean that will work the best for you. There could be different ways to do it, but I find that that's a good general place to be with all your clubs. Now, with the driver and maybe even your 3-wood, because it's so much longer, like this is a 56-degree wedge, and this is a driver. Look, I mean, this is a whole grip length longer. So you'll be a little bit more upright with your driver, and you'll reach just a little bit more. So if I think about, again, a little bit of flex there, push my hip back to have my hands about in front, your driver will be a little bit more. So you'll be a little bit more upright, and it'll be a little bit more out in front of you. So this would be like driver posture. You're a little bit more upright with the driver and reaching just a little bit more. And that's just because it's such a long club, right? If I'm like this, and again, this is not to say that you may not do better here or you may do better here. That's not to say that you won't, but in general, this is a good place to be if you're looking for where good is. So, but if you have it more like this, it's a little bit harder to get the club on a nice plane. Whereas if you're reaching just a little bit, it's a little bit easier to get that club on a nice plane. All right, so let's keep moving. So Marlon M says, I tend to blade a lot of chips when the ball sits on hard pan. Should I try to use the bounce or keeping my hands forward? Yeah, I would use the bounce if you're on hard pan. Just a little bit. So I'd open the face just a little bit, right, to expose the bounce. And then I would actually take some shot or some swings where you're coming down and you're just brushing the turf. And I want you to use the momentum. A lot of times what I see what people do is they'll really hinge the wrists and they'll kind of chop down into the golf ball. They're trying to hit the ground with the bounce. That's not what you want to do. You want a shallow angle of attack, and that way it can slide on top, not hit it and bounce off, but it can hit it and it can glide on top of it. That's what you want to have in that sort of lot. So these aren't easy lies to hit off of. You're generally going to hit them pretty low on the face, and they're going to have a pretty fair amount of spin. But the other thing that you can do to make this a little bit easier is to hit it on the toe a little bit. Because a lot of times you're going to have the toe down a little bit more. So that will help you get underneath the ball a little bit. So a little bit on the toe, a little bit open the face, and bring it in nice wide hands, nice and shallow, weight forward, and feel that club kind of slide on there. And then play it off the toe a little bit and hit those shots. Nice wide hands and bringing it through. You're going to have a little bit of forward shaft lean. You can see there as I'm coming in, that's not a lot of forward shaft lean, but it's enough to help me get some good stable impact. If I come in like that, that's going to be blade city typically, because I'm getting that leading edge too high, and I'm typically going to be bottoming out in this area. I want to be bottoming out right at the golf ball when I'm hitting these little shots off hard pan. So that's what I'd recommend for hitting off a hard pan. That's typically going to be the best situation. Now, typically a wedge is more difficult. If you have room to work with, I would use a lower lofted club because there's just more room for air there. You can play it the same way. I actually, if I'm on hard pan there's not anything between the green, that's like there's no rough or anything like that. If it's just kind of all hard pan, I actually prefer to use my hybrid. I don't have my hybrid in here, but what I'll do with my hybrid is kind of the same thing. If you pretend like this is my hybrid here, this is just an old putter, but if you pretend like this is the hybrid, I'll get this a little bit more upright. I'll choke down all the way down close to the metal, and I'll have this a little bit more upright, and I'll play it off the toe, and it'll be just a putting stroke. And I tell you what, that ball comes off of there nice and hot, and it gets rolling really, really nicely. That's also another good way. Now, that's if it's all hard pan up there, that's what I would recommend doing. That's really the easiest way. But if you got hard pan and then you got some rough, there's a bunker in front of you, you're going to need to get the ball up in the air, and you need the ball to stop quickly, you got to use a wedge. That's a high degree of difficulty shot, but you'll want to use the wedge there, and you just need to practice it. Practice the wide hands, open up the face, hit the ball off the toe, use get the bounce to kind of slide on the turf instead of trying to dig, because that's where you get in trouble. When I see people try to hit out of hard paint, because the ball, you can't let that club dig at all, because the ball is not being set up by the grass at all. You have to get that club sliding right underneath it. But if you have an obstacle in front of you, but you have a ton of green to work with, then I would consider using like a pitching wedge or a 9-iron, an 8-iron, depending on how much green you got to work with, and because that's just going to give you more margin for error, because you can hit it kind of like a putt a little bit, and you can just kind of pop it up and get the ball up and on the green and rolling toward the hole as soon as possible. That's going to be a much easier, kind of shot than the wedge shot. But you won't have a choice if you got to get the ball up in the air and stopping pretty quickly. All right, so Peter D says, I saw a video on YouTube where the instructor claims that too much grip pressure results in less hinging of the grip, or less hinging of the club, and a tendency to hit in front of the ball. Do you think that is true? He argues it is better to keep the grip pressure loose and keep the club in fingers. My concern is loose grip might result in the club head turning if the ball is struck improperly. What are your thoughts? So it's partially true, yes, but we do need to put force into this handle at certain points of the swing. So if you imagine if I actually kept my grip loose here and I swung into contact and I had a lot of speed here at contact, if I was really loose here, because I've heard a lot of people say, hold the club like a baby bird or like a tube of toothpaste. You don't want to squeeze out the toothpaste, something like that. If you literally did that, the club would go flying out of your hands. There's no way you'd be able to hold on to it. It might go flying out of your hands in the backswing, depending on how fast your backswing is, right? So you got to put some force into the handle. But what a lot of people do is they put force into the handle way too early, especially with the trail hand. And I'm guessing that's what this instructor is alluding to, right? So at the top of the swing, we get really, really tight with the grip, right? And then we really cast the club, and we put a lot of pressure, especially into these two fingers right here in our trail hand. We'll really cast the club, and that early release cause chunking, tops, all kinds of issues. Makes it very, very difficult. So the way that I would best describe it, the grip pressure that you put into it, is imagine you were taking this ball right here. Imagine you were a sidearm MLB closer pitcher, right? And you were at the stretch here, and you're going to throw this ball sidearm submarine style toward the plate. Well, what you would do is you would have pretty light grip pressure right here, but as you were starting down, that pressure would get the greatest kind of in this area, and then you would let it go, right? And then you're letting that go as you're coming through contact. So that's how I would describe the right hand grip pressure. It's fairly loose, as you go up the top. I wouldn't be putting like a death grip into this ball all the way up to the top. That would put so much tension in my arm, and I wouldn't really be able to get my wrist bent back. Because imagine if you made this fist as hard as you can, clenched it as hard as you can, and you tried to move your wrist around, it's not easy. But if you had it nice and loose, it's very easy to move this around, just like if I had this ball. So I want to get this wrist kind of bent back, and then here is where I put a lot of pressure into it, and then I let it go. With the left hand or the lead hand, it's like you're throwing a Frisbee, right? So if I was taking a Frisbee, I wouldn't have a really tight grip on it right here. I would be fairly loose, and then I'd be getting in this area where the impact zone is, I would have a lot more pressure into it, and that's right in here, and that's kind of what you're alluding to, right? If you get this unstable, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. The face is going to twist if you hit if you hit it off an off-center strike. It's just, even if you have a strong grip on this, the metal, the shaft is going to twist. It's going to torque open. There's not much you can do about it, but it may torque open more if it actually moves in your hand. It could happen even more. But basically, that force that you're putting into it takes over once this right hand lets go, And now I'm putting a lot of force into this handle at this point in the swing with my lead hand. And then once you get to where the club's released, it's released out in here, then it gets light again. It's just like if I were to throw the ball, right? I let it go, and now my hands is pretty light and loose up here. I throw that Frisbee, and that my hand is nice and loose when it gets up here. There's no wasted motion here, right? I'm not stopping it like that. I'm letting it go and letting it fling all the way around. So that's kind of the feeling that you want to have with the pressure in the fingers. So yes, it's true, but you don't want to have that really, really tight grip pressure up here. It's going to happen more in this area. It's going to happen fairly naturally as well. So I think the easiest way to think about it is to think you want to put as light of pressure into the grip as possible and still be able to hold on to it and control it. And the way that you can prove to yourself that you can do that naturally is if you just hold a club like this, right? So I'll hold this club like this. And if you told your buddy, hey, come in and pull on this club. Well, what are you going to do naturally? Are you going to let him just pull that club out of your hand? Or are you going to put a little bit more force into this handle so that he doesn't? That's the same thing that's happening in the golf swing. As there's more forces acting on this club, you're going to hold on to it tighter so that it doesn't fly out of your hand. So as loose a grip as you need to still be able to control it throughout the swing. So if you think about it at address, if I was going to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm thinking 2 out of 10 at address. As I go up to the top, it's becoming more of a 4 out of 10. If it was 2 out of 10, it'd probably fall out of my hands, right? So I need to feel a little bit more of a 4 out of 10. As I start down with my trail hand, I'm still thinking 4 out of 10, but with my lead hand, as you start the swing, it's actually still a 4 out of 10. And then as you get in here with your trail hand, now we're getting like a 6 or 7 out of 10, right? And your lead hand's staying at a 4. And then right here, after my trail hand's now going down, it's more like a 4 out of 10, not very much. But my lead hand is like 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10. It's got to hold on to this club. This is where the most force is happening. You're going to feel that mostly in your first 3 fingers here. And then after that, it goes back down 4 out of 10. Then you come all the way around to the full finish. It's like a 2 out of 10 again. So that's basically how it works. But there's no way for you to think about that throughout the swing. You can't be thinking 2 out of 10, okay, 4 out of 10, and 6 out of 10. That's not going to work. It's not going to happen. So what I'd recommend doing is hold the club loosely, absolutely, but not so loose that you can't control it. If you feel the club moving out of your hand as you're bringing the club out of the top, and as you're starting in the transition, you feel the club moving out of your hand, you're not putting enough pressure into the handle. So I put a little bit more pressure into the handle so that way you can control it a little bit more. All right, so Rick B says, I hate to take your and everyone's time, such a basic issue, but need some help with you go over the correct posture and at address. I started raising up on shots off and on lately. I don't know whether I'm bending knees too much and the plane too shallow, but can't correct it. And does your posture address stay the same from driver through irons? Rick, hopefully you were around for when I just talked about that a little bit ago, and hopefully that helped. If you weren't, go ahead and watch the archived office hours for kind of the recap on that. I went over that earlier. So Peter D, another question. So 2, most of the time I slice my driver and pull my irons. Any suggestions to correct these tendencies? So just like what I talked about earlier, spine angle, the move, never slice again course, those are all things you may want to look at. So spine angle, if you're vertical, you're going to tend to want to come over the top, slice, pull. If you are in a good spine angle and you see that you're coming over the top and you're getting that slice, pull, then I'd recommend the never slice again course and or the move course. So to get to those courses, click the house icon, go to the that's going to take you to the home page. Scroll down the home page, you'll see a list of all the courses there. So Terry R says, how do you deal with nerves in the golf swing? You just keep putting yourself in situations where you need to be nervous, right? So you're always going to have, not always, but depending on if the situation is escalated, like I haven't played tournament golf, like real individual tournament golf. Like I played in some scrambles and some team games and stuff like that. But I haven't actually played in a tournament as an individual in several years. If I went and did that right now, I'd be nervous as heck, definitely, for sure. I'm not really nervous playing in scrambles and stuff like that. If I'm playing with someone I've never played with before, there's definitely some nerves there. You don't want to embarrass yourself or anything like that. So it's just putting yourself in situations more and more frequently where you're basically getting used to it, right? And once you overcome them, right? Once you've played through it, like, oh, this isn't, it's not so bad, right? Then you kind of realize that the next time. So you just got to keep putting yourself in situations like that. It's like, Michael Jordan, he wasn't hitting game winners and clutch baskets from the very start. It was from getting into that position over and over and over and over again, where basically it's not there anymore, right? So that's why I recommend it just comes with time, putting yourself in situations where you're going to have, like, if you've never played in your league before, let's say you've always played by yourself, right? Well, the first time that you play with somebody, there's going to be nerves. There's definitely going to be nerves. And then you play with people some more, you put yourself in that situation, the nerves start to kind of go away a little bit. You get used to it, right? And then let's say you've never played in an actual competition before, right? Well, now there's going to be nerves. But let's say you play in your, I tell you what, my first college tournament, I was super nervous, very, very nervous. And then as I got less and less, as I continued to put myself in the situation of being in the tournament. I mean, by the time I was, a junior, it just felt like going out and playing golf. I wasn't really nervous. I was nervous. I was always nervous on the first tee, but once you hit that first tee shot, I was off and running. So it's just a matter of putting yourself in that situation over and over and over again, and the nerves will eventually go away. You may always have them on the first tee, and one way that you can kind of prepare for that is if you have access to a driving range and be able to hit some balls beforehand, I would just kind of go through your routine and that first tee shot. So the first hole at the Legacy Club where we shoot our videos and where I play most of my golf, it's a par 4. I think it's 400 something. I can't remember. But anyway, there's a bunker to the right. There's out of bounds to the left. And it really calls for a nice draw that you start at the bunkers and turn to the right. So, I mean, it's to me, at least initially, when the first few times I played it, I was very intimidated by it because my general shot shape at that time was more of a fade, a little bit of a fade, and that's not a fade-friendly shot. So, basically, I got to where I got better at hitting some draws, and I typically hit a draw on there now. But that's what it comes down to, is actually putting yourself in the situation on the driving range a little bit, going through that, gaining some confidence with that, and then going straight out there and doing it. That's one way to do it as well, if you have access to that. But if you don't, then it's just kind of like there's not much you can do about it. But if you put yourself in the situation enough, it will get better and better and better. All right, so Frederick S. says, I was looking at the bottom of my woods and noticed the white marks that the tee makes. They're often 20, 45 degree angle across the face of what I expect to be perpendicular. What does this say about my swing? Well, it says that you're cutting across the ball, most likely. You're more than likely cutting across the ball into out to in, whatever it is, most likely out to in. So I'd look at whatever your general shot shape is. If you're slicing a lot, go to the never slice again course. Most likely is what you need to work on. If it's a lot of hooks, then you may want to work on the never hook again course. But most likely you're cutting across the ball, and that's why you're seeing that. So Chad B says, any suggestions on keeping the head from tilting left and slightly down when you turn behind the ball for a right-handed golfer? So turning left from tilting left. So you're tilting like this and then slightly down. That's fine. I mean, look at Dustin Johnson's swing. Dustin Johnson, when he goes back, he actually his head goes like this and goes down like that. That's completely fine. That as long as it's not, it's the head's not staying completely still. The head moves. The head moves in the golf swing. A lot of times it looks like it's staying completely still with tour players, and that's because they don't have any wasted movement. It's very fluid. Typically, when you look at amateur players, if they have a lot of head movement, it's really jerky. It's really moving around. That's why it looks like it's moving a lot. But with a tour player, it's more like this, right? So it looks like my head's not moving, but that's just because it's moving very, very slowly in different directions. Typically, tour player will move away from the golf ball and maybe even up sometimes at the start of the swing, and then as they get up to the top, they start lowering, and then as they get in transition, it starts to lower even more and get left. And then as they come into the golf ball, sometimes depending on the club, with the driver, a lot of times it will move back and up. And with an iron, sometimes it will just stay steady into the golf ball, or it may just come up just a little bit. So the head movement is fine as long as it's not jerky and moving around. If it's jerky and moving around, that's most likely because of another issue. It's because your spine angle is off or something like that. So I would look at your spine angle and make sure that that's good. Whenever I get a new student and we look at spine angle, what I always do with their video is I'll take a line and I'll draw it on each side of their torso. So just like right here. And what I like to see, and it's important to have the camera still when you're looking at this. So use like a tripod or something like that, or somebody that has a very steady hand. And what I like to see is as they turn up to the top, I like to see their body essentially stay within those lines, or they can be a little bit into this trail line. They can be a little bit into it as they're loading up. If they're moving like this, or they're moving way too much, then that's going to be an issue with consistency. And you can see when I did that, my head moved a lot, right? So that's really where the excessive head movement comes from, is from the spine angles being off. So I like to also see the overall angle of their torso to be the same. So they can be within those lines, but maybe they're like this, right? Now my torso is more like this, and it's going to be leaning toward the target. I'm typically going to have to jerk my head back to try and get the club back on plane. So look at your spine angles. That's the most important thing. Look at your swing on video, draw those lines on there, make sure it's nice and still, and see if you're staying within those lines, and see if your body's at the same torso. It doesn't have to be exact. If you're just a little bit more angled away, or a little bit angled toward the target, or a little bit more angled toward the target as you go up to the top, that's fine. It's just the excessive, where it's like this, or you're too much like this, or you slid off, or you got a reverse weight shift and you're like this. That's where you can get in trouble. So that's really where the excessive head movement comes from, is from excessive spine movement. All right, so Doug S. says, I like to turn my shoulders and hips and arms together to start the backswing, but I have trouble sliding my hips to the right instead of turning them back. Is there a drill to help me? I'd recommend working through the compression line courses. What you're describing is getting out of your compression line. So the compression line is the line that goes from your lead ankle, lead hip, lead shoulder. We want that to be all in a nice straight line, and either vertical or slightly angled away from the target. You can be more angled away with the driver to promote a more upward angle of attack, but that's essentially what you want. What you're describing is you're turning everything back, and then you go like this, right? So now my hip is out of alignment with my shoulder and my ankle. So I'd recommend the compression line course to get you to where you're getting to your lead side. You're keeping this hip inside your ankle and pushing it back out of the way, so you can get into this position right here at impact. That's going to be the compression line course. So go up to the top of the screen, select the house icon, scroll down on the home page, and select the compression line course and work through the drills. All right, so excuse me. So Gufran A says, how to close club face and downswing when I do lag, face get open. So good question. So we actually talk about this in the move course. So what we want, there's several ways to open and close the face. We'll go over that real quick. So I always think this is an interesting discussion. And a lot of people, whenever I show this to a student, it seems like it's always a winner for sure. So what I'm gonna do, I got my little little angle finder, my face finder here to kind of show you what's going on. So there's essentially 3 things that happen with the club face that can cause you to open or close it. One is the release of the club. So if I release this club early, right? So if I'm going like this, I'm flipping through impact. That's actually a means to close the face. So if I have this straight up and down, so I'm going to have this shaft straight up and down like this, and I'm going to have that club face square. If I push this club back, which would be releasing it early, you can see that that closes the face. If I push it forward, you can see that that opens the face. So that would be a release out in front is actually opening the face. So you have to close the face in a different way. So if you're used to closing the face by early releasing, and now you're releasing the club later, and that face is open, you have to close the face in a different way. One other way is to get the handle lower when you're coming into contact. So if I have it straight up and down like this, and the club face square, if I lower the handle, it closes the face. If I raise the handle, it opens the face. So typically, if you're getting lag and you're releasing that club out in front, you're actually getting the handle lower as well, which helps you to close the face a little bit. But it's not enough. It's not enough to get that face all the way closed. The other ways to close the face are by twisting the handle. So that's, if I just have it like this, that's twisting the handle, right? So the ways that you do that, the way that a lot of people do that is they'll flip the club and roll the arms over. So I'm rolling the arms over like this. That's not the best way to do it. What we see tour players do that a little bit. Some of them do it more than others, but what most of the tour players are doing, the better ball strikers, is they're twisting the handle by turning their wrists like this, right? So that's, you can see there, that's closing the face. So that's what we talk about in the move course, is getting this happening. So what I'd recommend doing when you're working on your lag, I would go up to the top, I'd pause at the top, and I would do that twist of the handle to close the face, and I would get your lag, and then look, I'm coming into contact, square club face, right? Whereas you're coming into contact before, open club face. So go up here, turn that handle, then go down into impact, and then go up to the top again. Once you get comfortable with that, then go up to the top and shorten that pause, right? The pause, make it a nice long pause in the beginning to get that twist, but then I would shorten that pause. And then I would try to add some fluidity to it where there's no pause, but you're going up here. It's nice and fluid. You're turning that down. So I'll just do it in slow motion. I'll be going up here, turning it down, slow motion. Now I'm getting my handle turned down. I'm getting my lag, and I'm getting my handle out in front with the square face at the same time. But that's basically the move, the tennis racket drill. Those are good ones to work on that. So Doug S says, my hips slide left on the backswing. So I'd make sure that you're loading into your trail side. If you're going like this, right, you can't really load into your lead side. So I'd make sure right away, before the club even starts going back, I would try to get some pressure in that lead foot. So pressure, and then the club's moving back. And I'd be pushing that hip back and out of the way. So if you're going like this, that's a reverse weight shift. If you're starting the backswing and you're going like that, that's going to be a reverse weight shift. You're putting all your weight here, and then that's just going to be hard to get some good speed and distance from that. So I would just be pushing the hip back and out of the way to help you get into a better position. All right, so it looks like we are set to go. So thanks everybody for joining me. Reminder, Robin will be here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Bring some good questions for him. I will be back Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. But tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time with Robin. Everybody have a good weekend, and I will talk to you next time.